So thank you for having me. I just literally got something caught in my throat, so no, I don't even know if I can talk. So thank you, Shahir Nazi, for the warm welcome. I am thrilled to be here with all of you at the 2018, thank you, Future of Technology Summit. My name is Jacqueline-Woods. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for IBM Global Business Partners, and that's a $12 billion business. And what I was asked to speak about this afternoon was really about diversity and inclusion in technology, and for the most part, it's probably the lack thereof. So this will be framed not just from my own experiences, but what we're seeing broadly across the industry and what's changing to improve the disposition for women and minorities. We have seen some progress, but the progress probably hasn't been fast enough. And I think that we're still challenged in many areas. And so I'll talk about that. As a minority female executive with over 25 years of industry knowledge and experience, I've really seen firsthand the challenges that are posed by the lack of women in minority in technology. Most of the time, I'm the only female. Much of the time, I am certainly the only African American. And I will tell you that at my level, even in IBM, which is a company that I think makes an effort in this area, there are only 4 African American women at my level in the entire company, and we have 400,000 employees. So I still think we have a fair amount of work to do. And so when we think about leadership, where are the women and where are the minorities, particularly in senior and executive roles? We've all heard and have become all too familiar with the research. So according to Tech Republic, there are half as many African Americans and Hispanics in technology as the rest of the private sector. 83% of tech executives are white. We don't have a population in the US that's 83% white, so it's disproportionate on its face. According to the Observer, Women in Tech Statistics, women hold only about 11% of executive positions at Silicon Valley companies. While I live in Connecticut, work in New York today, I'm actually from the West Coast and I'm from the Valley. So I grew up in Silicon Valley and my primary experience was with Oracle Corporation. So women only own about 5% of tech startups, and in the high-tech industry, the quit rate, so kind of just the frustration, probably the frustration around not moving, the frustration around not seeing progress, the frustration around just kind of feeling like you're not going to get there, the quit rate is more than twice as high for women at 41% than it is for men at 17%. And venture capitalists invested just $1.46 billion in women-led companies, but male companies earned $58 billion in investments. And to think that that's not firsthand experience is not true. I have someone who works for me whose niece was doing a startup that essentially Amazon ended up buying, and the reason that she sold it was she was having trouble getting it funded. And this actually the application used artificial intelligence to essentially look at a part, and effectively you could find any part that you were looking for on old machinery and things like that. And so for the fact that Amazon bought it and the fact that she couldn't raise the capital, and what she was saying is that her male counterparts as compared to her female counterparts, that she was having trouble. So she ended up selling it. And it's a shame. I mean, she made, you're 20 years old, you get $7 million. That seems like a lot of money. But if I ran pricing and licensing for Oracle, so I ran it for all the software business, I can tell you the value of software. Just in the support fees alone, $7 million is nothing. Additionally, there is a huge cost for companies pay for diversity barriers that may exist. And that number is thought to be about $16 billion. It's a pretty big number. And it's not a surprise to any of us in this room that a more diverse workforce leads to higher company profits, happier colleagues, and more creative teams. So it is true. So if this is true, why do technology companies still lag in hiring women and minority candidates? Why do women and minorities seem to face imbalanced barriers in the workplace? And the truth is, there is no one right answer. So there isn't a single reason why this happens. There are many reasons, and that the reasons are, maybe just getting in the door, trying to make sure that you have upward mobilities once you're in the door. But essentially, it's the responsibility of all of us to do our part. The lack of women and minorities in technology is not a woman problem. It's not a man problem either. It's not a black problem. It's not a white problem, Hispanic or Asian. I really see it as a collective problem. And it's collectively our opportunity to fix, to create solutions that are beneficial to all. It takes someone to challenge the status quo, see it as a sense of urgency to change, stand on it, and to drive throughout the company. And it really takes leadership at the senior levels. Take a moment and ask yourself, what can I be doing to build and drive a more diverse organization? If you look around your organization, ask yourself, who are your colleagues? So, what can I be doing to build this organization that we think needs to be more diverse, and actually embrace that? That's a question that I think that we all have to ask ourselves. How do we construct more diverse teams? How do we provide more or better opportunities for women and minorities? The onus kind of can't be on kind of the one black person in the room or the one this person in the room, and I think that's what's hard. I've even had this discussion even with my own colleagues, because when we talk about we have underrepresentation and we need to change, this conversation comes up, and I have to tell you that if you're like the brown person in the room, everyone looks at you as if you have the answer. I mean, I am African American, but I'm definitely not like the spokesperson. And so this kind of kept happening. We kept having these, drills and talking about it, and we get down a list, and I'm not kidding. It would come, and then everyone would look at me. It's almost like, Jacqueline, you're the black expert. No, actually I'm not. I am the people expert though, and I like all people, so I tend to build very diverse teams. And finally I said, this makes me really uncomfortable. I feel like when we get to this conversation on underrepresentation, it's like you all look at me and as if I'm supposed to be the person that finds all the candidates. I'm supposed to be the person that kind of vets people, and I'm kind of the person that does that. I said, this has to be something that the whole organization does. And I think that's how we have to think about it and embrace it. It's just like if I was, just assume that white men were in the minority. And if they were, I don't think if you were the one white male in the room that you would want everyone looking to you to be the answer for all the other white men that we wanted to find to build on our teams. And so I think that we really have to kind of step back and at least try to put ourselves in the, position of where we, where others are. Of course, my screen closed. So we are starting to see, I think we are starting to see some bright spots. So I do think that there's some opportunity. So we see some flashes of light, and we do see some things starting to change. The lack of women and minorities in technology is starting to change through both programs, policies, and through other creative avenues. So we are seeing people take bolder steps to, one, acknowledge that there's a problem, and to, two, really try to tackle it and do something about it. And I think the most important thing for any problem to be solved is to actually acknowledge that you perceive that there is a problem and that there is a gap. When you don't even have that acknowledgement, you might as well not waste time trying to actually solve it, because there's not an acknowledgement that something is wrong. So if we look at kind of what programs are out there and what do we think is working. If we take Google's Howard West program, this pilot program was launched last year with 26 Howard University students. Most of you in Washington, D.C. know that Howard University is here. It's a historically black university, and students earning a 3-month residency at the company's headquarters. So Google recently announced that it is expanding this pilot program to a full academic year and opening it up to students from other historically black colleges and universities. If you want to hire minority candidates, you need to go to where the minority candidates are. Period. You have to seek it out. You have to be proactive. Here's a policy example. In July 2017, the Massachusetts Pension Fund, which has assets upward of $66 billion, so they've got money to invest, and is a shareholder in about 9,000 companies, created new proxy voting guidelines that essentially say Massachusetts doesn't tolerate a board whose makeup is less than 30% women and people of color. That's a statement, because if you think you're not going to get the money, what will you do? Will your behavior change? It's likely that it will, because you're trying to woo investors to your firm, always. And finally, leading from the top and leading by example. Last week, I was recognized by Black Enterprise Magazine as one of the top 300 black executives in corporate America. There were about 100 of us there. It wasn't the recognition or the award that took my breath away. It was what happened after that I thought was really special. I've received other recognition similar to this. So yes, while I'm proud of it, it wasn't the only thing. It was the words of Jamie Dimon, Chairman and CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase. They were most impactful. J.P. Morgan Chase has a managing director whose title is, quote, advancing black leaders. Now that's a bold statement. If that's your title, then what's your job? Your job is to look across your organization at this group who seems to not have progressed as others have, and try to put in programs that ensure that they get the visibility, sponsorship, coaching, and mentoring that they need to advance in the organization. He came to the podium and he talked about his family being from Greece and the fall of the 300. So he talked about the Spartans of Greece, and basically, you know, most of us know that story, against the Persians, and that he understood that they were outnumbered. So essentially, here's the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase telling the top 100 black executives in front of him that he understands that we are outnumbered. He understands where we are. The first thing for anyone to do in any problem that you face is, like, when someone acknowledges it, it's like, finally, like, you, thank you for at least saying it out loud. It's true. We're outnumbered. Thank you for acknowledging it. And he used this example from Thermopylae really to kind of say how hard the 300 were working, like, even though they died, not that he wanted us to take that same path, but he was using it more as he knew the fortitude that it took for us to be in that group, to be in that room. And then he talked about, literally, that it was harder for blacks, period. He made that statement. It's harder for you. I know it's been harder for you than it was for me and my peers. And I want to do something about it for those that are in my firm, because when I look at the numbers and we hire the right people clearly from the right schools, I need to understand why blacks are not making it to the level of managing director. And so they do have a managing director of advancing black leaders. What that also says is the top of the organization has set out to his direct reports and said, this is a problem that we all need to work on together. He then started to talk about the drop-off that starts between year 7 and year 10. People are disillusioned, they're disappointed, and they simply leave the business because they feel there is no opportunity for advancement. He put the blame squarely on himself and his leadership team. He even called out when people questioned it, because people said, well, why blacks? Why not this group or that group? He said, look, out of all the groups, the blacks have not progressed as much, particularly given their numbers in the general population. It doesn't make sense. So he also kind of stopped the FUD, right? The doubt that was being seeded by others who said, well, why this group versus that group? Well, if other groups don't have those same deficiencies, focus on the one problem that you have. It doesn't mean that you can't advance Hispanics, you can't advance women, you can't advance Asians. What it said was, the biggest problem that we have that I want to tackle is with blacks, and that's the one that is requires my most immediate attention, and it's the one that I'm going to work on. And then, some would say it took courage for him to say that. And I was sitting there going, well, I know everyone has a cell phone and a copy and a this and a that, and where's this going to show up on Twitter, and what kind of blowback is he going to get? And then I just kind of said to myself afterwards when I talked to him, I said it was a breath of fresh air for the acknowledgement. It was a breath of fresh air. Sometimes we just need acknowledgement. Some of you may be conflicted as where you go next or what you should do with your own careers. Here are things that you already know. You're held accountable for your goals and meeting your objectives. In any company, I can tell you what my number is this year. It's like $13 billion, and I actually can tell you down to the nit of what it is. You also need to hold the persons in your organization who have been tasked to help you navigate your careers to make them responsible and accountable too. That is not a black statement, that's not a white statement. That is a statement about the responsibility that we have as leaders to those who are in our organizations. And if you do the right thing as a leader, everything else follows suit. So color becomes not a factor at that point. The other thing that I would really want to say is intent is not action. So when people show you who they are the first time, my favorite quote from Maya Angelou, believe them. If someone is telling you, kind of leading you on, it's like in a relationship, it's leading you on. They don't have an intention. They're not going to marry you. It's time to acknowledge it. And so I think that we need to have those truthful conversations with ourselves. And then again, this is something we say at work often, don't tell me, don't tell me, show me. And my thing has always been, don't tell me how much you like me and value me. Demonstrate it through your actions. Demonstrate it through your actions. You have to teach people how you want to be treated. And if you've accepted being passed over, it will certainly continue. And you need to ask the hard questions and expect the truth in return. And so sometimes, just in terms of coaching and really being able to accept what we're hearing from others, we may not want to hear it, but we need to understand that every organization has organizational norms. And not that you need to conform, but you certainly need to understand them to be able to navigate them. Ask the hard questions and really accept the truth. And if you don't, these things are going to continue to be blockers for you. Be prepared to work on what you need to do and correct them and then move forward. Once you have made a change though, hold people accountable for acknowledging your change. We've been in situations where people have changed and people kind of want to keep bringing up the past. If you've changed, you deserve credit for that change because that's the feedback that we gave you. So once it's happened, make sure that someone acknowledges it and then expect to ask a question to move forward. And the thing that I always tell pretty much anyone that I ever mentor is don't ask, don't get. So if you don't ask the question about your raise, your promotion, your advancement, how well you're doing, maybe how well you're not doing, those questions will not be answered. You have to be the best advocate for yourself. There's no one else that's going to do that for you. And I think the most important thing is to stand on your own principles. There are winners and there are losers, but there are no losers on your own authenticity. Your integrity will sustain you when experiencing peer pressure or competition, or if you are in a male-dominated industry, seriously, make friends with the guys. You don't have to hang out with everyone that basically has your same gender. Ensure that you have good relationships with men. Most of my mentors are men, and I think that, they have helped me. So men are not the enemy. They are in the positions, generally, they are in positions of power. You need to have them as an ally if you want to move forward. So it's not an us versus them. It should be a we, and how do we work together to help advance the objectives that we both have. And more important than anything, you don't have to compromise who you are. I think that's critically important. I think when people do, we all see that you've compromised yourself. It never works out. It's a short-term gain for a long-term situation that doesn't work out. And so I would just ask you, the most important I think you can do personally is to maintain your integrity and your authenticity. And so when I think about where we are today, I still am very hopeful. I think sometimes I feel like the discourse and the public discourse can be hurtful. But what I look to is the fact that discussions are being had about comments that are being made. And as long as we keep that dialogue open, I think that we can make progress. And as long as we truly, really have empathy for others, I think we will all grow together. Thank you.